Hi, this is Argonax, and we talk about things that don't matter. The 2010s was a very defining time for Valve, as most of the company was dictated by their two big esports games, namely Dota 2 and Counter-Strike. These two games don't need an introduction.
What a gamer.
So excuse me while I do exactly that.
What a god of a gamer, seriously.
Dota 2 is the successor to Dota All-Stars, the game that kicked off the MOBA genre, and Counter-Strike is the original and undisputed competitive tactical shooter. And Riot Games still found a way to ape both of them. Both these games, esports juggernauts. They're basically household names, as long as your household is at least one gamer in them. But now, the 2020s are in full swing, and they also released a new game, Deadlock, which will probably be their big esports game when it comes out in about a year or two, maybe, hopefully. Right, Gabe? It's coming out soon, right? With Deadlock here and all the rumors about Valve's new development, such as the totally real and definitely happening Half-Life 3 development, it's not cope, I swear to God, it is. Valve basically has a lot on their plate right now, and it begs the question, what are Valve's future plans for their existing competitive esports games, namely Counter-Strike, Dota, and Deadlock? So join me as I try to decipher this delicate balancing act as Valve tries to handle all of these major esports juggernauts and try to see exactly, based off their history, trends, and tendencies, what we can expect for their games moving forward and what we can expect for their new games in the future. Hey there, Internet Wanderer, my name is Argonax. In this channel we make video reviews, essays, commentaries, and shorts. I hope you enjoy my stuff enough to do the YouTube things listed here, especially the liking and subscribing part, and special shout out to all the channel members who help keep the channel going. Their contributions mean a lot to me and their support is extremely appreciated. But let's not dwell on this for too long. Let's get back to the topic at hand. Now, Valve makes a lot of games, and of the games they do make, their multiplayer titles have always been well known. Left 4 Dead, Team Fortress, Day of Defeat, even their single-player games like Half-Life and Portal have pretty good online game modes, such as Half-Life 2 Deathmatch and Portal Co-op. But the two multiplayer games that Valve really wanted to become big esports are Dota and Counter-Strike. And these two games have made Valve a lot of money and a lot of recognition. There's an entire subset of gamers out there that, when they think of the word Valve or the company Valve, they don't associate it with Half-Life or Portal or such. They associate Valve with Counter-Strike or Dota. There are millions of these players. I would know, I've met a lot of them. Counter-Strike and Dota 2 are titans. They're huge, they're gigantic. Like your mom. Both these games are known for their multi-million-dollar tournaments. There are pro Dota 2 players out there who have made enough money by winning Dota tournaments that their grandchildren can probably live comfy lives because of it. Dota 2 is actually the ground zero for battle passes. Did you know that? Yeah, I know. Valve is responsible for the battle pass hellscape that we live in now. I know many people yearn for the days of old school Valve when they could focus on less competitive games and instead more on character or story-driven games like Half-Life, Portal, Ricochet, Team Fortress, and Left 4 Dead. And I totally understand. I want a new Valve game as well. I mean, shit, anytime I see a new video or new post talking about supposed Half-Life 3 leaks, I'm on that shit immediately. I want a new Half-Life game, man. Come on. Please, Gabe. But the success of Valve's esports games cannot be understated. There are millions, maybe even tens of millions of players who have never played another Valve game in their gaming lives. But those gamers will see Dota or Counter-Strike as their forever game. And these players have nothing but appreciation for Valve for giving them the game that they basically want to sink all of their free time on. Millions of players log in every day only because they want to grind out and play these two games and nothing else. To them, Valve isn't Half-Life or Portal. To them, Valve is these two games. But with all of that said, a new concern comes up. I worry that Valve is spreading themselves a little too thin with all these games and projects that they're working on. Consider the fact that Valve only has about 300 workers, give or take, and only a few of those 300 have actual competitive game experience, since balancing a game around being an esport is a very difficult task that requires years of experience. A lot of these 300 employees that Valve employs, redundant, nice, probably have experience in things such as back-end stuff or hardware development, game coding. That doesn't necessarily mean that these guys can contribute to the competitive side of an esport game. I understand that this is a universal thing for all companies trying to make competitive games, but with Valve, manpower is something that they actually don't have a lot of. Even other game companies that employ more workers, such as Riot Games with 4,000 employees and Blizzard with over 13,000, still run into this issue where, despite having all this people working under them, most of the time, especially with Blizzard, they can barely maintain a game's competitive aspect, or their games in general. I'm never going to stop making fun of Blizzard, by the way, until they get their shit together, which, let's be real, they're not.
Is that we won't be delivering that dedicated hero mode, the talent trees, that long-term power progression.
Nothing about this is good.
Those things just aren't
Not one thing.
So, balancing and managing esports games, competitively viable esports games, takes a lot of resources and time. And unfortunately, these are things that Valve doesn't have an unlimited amount of. In fact, no company has unlimited amount of these things. So, I worry for the future of these games, especially if Valve continues moving forward for their new projects and aspects. But let's first talk about these two games, and let's do a little dive into them. First off, Dota. Dota is a relatively, quote-unquote, young game, at least compared to Valve's other games. The MOBA genre itself is pretty old, having originated from Dota All-Stars, which did come out in 2004. But Valve only took control of Dota from 2011 onwards, whereas Counter-Strike was a Half-Life mod that originated all the way back in the late 90s. But one thing that Counter-Strike has over Dota is the fact that, despite Counter-Strike having many changes over the years, it never got so overwhelming that you could say that the game got completely overhauled, at least when compared to Dota. Counter-Strike is a game that doesn't necessarily need a lot of upkeep, that doesn't necessarily need insane overhauls to the game mechanics. Counter-Strike could literally go the next 10 years with only bug fixes and small number changes, and the Counter-Strike player base will be more than happy with that. Dota, on the other hand, is the type of game that requires massive overhauls or sweeping changes every other year in order for the game to remain interesting and the player base happy and invested. There have been multiple times where Dota 2 has gotten massive gameplay updates that the community would jokingly call it Dota 3. Such updates include the 7.0 update, the New Frontiers update, or the one where they added facets and innates to the game, which is rather recent. In other words, Dota requires a ton of attention and gameplay changes in order for the game to be competitively viable and to be engaging for its player base to keep playing the game, whereas Counter-Strike, for the most part, does not. And don't get me wrong, that's not a bad thing. It's one of the reasons why I like to call Counter-Strike as the chess of the competitive gaming world. The game has more or less remained the same since coming out more than 20 years ago. Forgive me if that last statement might show some of my ignorance, but I have far more experience with Dota than I do Counter-Strike, and this is just the observation that I've come up with as far as observing the development and the balancing of these two games. And thusly, Valve is becoming more and more involved in making new games and maintaining all of their current projects, games, and products. I might make a dedicated video talking about how Valve is spreading themselves too thin, but essentially, in a nutshell, the company's attention has to be balanced between all these different products and games. And now that they've got Deadlock and these other supposed new games coming out, I worry for the future of these esports juggernauts. And I would argue that my worry is somewhat justified. Valve has shown that they aren't afraid to leave a game completely high and dry. Just look at what happened with Team Fortress 2, for example. Sure, the game is still alive and thriving, but that's despite of Valve's negligence and apathy towards this game. So to finally answer the question, what do I think what's going to happen to these two games, Counter-Strike and Dota? Well, in my opinion, both will probably suffer from less content. But of the two, Dota is definitely more susceptible to the effects of lessened developer attention. Yes, I know that Valve has been hiring a bunch of other companies and new employees into the company, so sure, they have a little bit more manpower, but as to what level that these people are going to be working on pre-existing projects and developments, I cannot say. They might have more workers, sure, but they also have more projects to work on, so it kind of balances out. But as a player of Dota, I can definitely say that over the last 2 or 3 years, the content of Dota, while still high quality, is definitely lessening, at least in terms of frequency. For example, we got the new Frontiers and the Facet updates relatively recently, but the wait to get to that point was quite long, and I worry that waits between updates are only going to get longer. For added context, the new Frontiers update was an update that expanded the Dota 2 map and made it basically twice as big and adding a shit ton of stuff to it. And the Facet update essentially split every Dota hero into 2 or more distinct upgrade paths, diversifying the gameplay even further than it already was. It also doesn't help the fact that Dota was primarily headed by the developer IceFrog. For those who don't know, he's the guy who was basically in charge of Dota for the last 20 years. Most of the gameplay decisions and updates was headed by this guy. Anytime you see a frog in Dota or a mango, that's a reference to him. He likes mangoes apparently. I totally relate. And now he has started work on a new project which is now known as Deadlock. Anytime you see a frog in the game, it's a nod towards him. Now, I cannot say definitively if he isn't working on Dota anymore, but even in the best case scenario, his attention is definitely going to be divided now since he's got a new game to work on. And this goes for Valve as a whole as well. I remember either hearing or reading in an article, or maybe it was the official game commentary for Half-Life Alyx, that whenever Valve was working on Half-Life Alyx, they had to adopt the development structure of a typical company because in order to make Half-Life Alyx, it required all hands on deck in order to make the game. Which, for those who are unaware, Valve doesn't really operate like a regular company. No one is assigned to specific departments to work on. Everyone within the company are free to work on whatever project they wish for that specific day. But when Half-Life Alyx was being made, they didn't do that. So just to make a brand new AAA game that they released a few years ago, Valve had to do something completely drastic to do so. And now with them working on more projects, especially ones that are maybe going to require all hands on deck, their other projects and games are definitely going to suffer. Ever since 2015, the amount of content that Dota has received is insane. Multiple game-shifting updates, countless community events. They released a MOBA Battle Royale mode, a 4-player co-op story campaign, a highly replayable roguelike gauntlet mode. All of these events, super fun, all for free. And they did it just because, I don't know, they just wanted to have fun with the game. These events are insanely good. The community remembers these games fondly. And while I wasn't as invested in Counter-Strike, I still liked playing Danger Zone. Where is it, Valve? Are you ever going to port it to Source 2? Give me fucking Danger Zone Counter-Strike 2, goddamn. There's an event going on right now in Dota called the Crownfall Update, and it's rather lukewarm. It's not bad, but honestly the most notable thing about it is the fact that they made a comic for the event, and I guess for the first time in years, the legendary skins in Dota are no longer locked behind a battle pass. To put it more succinctly, I worry that Dota's best days are behind it now. I know that the International, the biggest tournament of Dota, once known for the biggest prize pools in gaming, is no longer handled by Valve, and the days of gigantic figures in its prize pool, yeah, that's not happening anymore. I wouldn't say that Dota's player base or Counter-Strike's player base is declining, but that's only something that's going to become more apparent as the years go on. I understand that this is completely natural. As long as games are competitive and online, decline is bound to happen at some point. Think of the big games of 2000s and 2010s, and a lot of them, especially the competitive multiplayer ones, I doubt they were able to hold their player bases for this long. There's exceptions, of course, but even then, a lot of these games, their glory days are basically past them. And again, it's natural. It's going to happen to every game. It's going to happen to Fortnite, it's going to happen to Apex Legends, and it's going to happen to Dota and Counter-Strike. Especially with Dota. And it shows. Valve are working on a new game. There was a joke that Deadlock was going to become the TF2 killer, but honestly, in 5 years, I can see Deadlock being the Dota killer, honestly. And don't get me wrong, I love Deadlock. It's incredibly fun. For a game so early in its development, the amount of community events and stuff that this game has is insane. Deadlock has already had its community-driven tournaments, and I can expect official Valve tournaments in its future. So I guess this is more just me preparing for my beloved game Dota to reach that slow decline. If this was the structure of the movie, Dota had already hit its climax, and now I'm just waiting for its falling action. I sincerely apologize if I didn't have a lot to say about Counter-Strike. Again, I am showing my ignorance a little bit. I wish I was more involved in it, but Counter-Strike just never hooked me the way that Dota do. But what do you guys think? Tell me in the comments below, Internet Wanderer. Do you worry about Dota and or Counter-Strike's future going forward? Personally, I'm not so worried about Counter-Strike. It took them like 10 years to add a new gun to the game with the R8 revolver, and then took like another, 5, 6, 7 years for them to add the MP5 back to the game. I could be getting the years wrong on that, but let me know. I think Counter-Strike is going to be fine for the most part, but I'm mostly just worried about Dota. But again, tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. And thank you, Internet Wanderer, for watching all the way to the end. I'd like to give special thanks once again to the channel members. Their support means a lot to me, but every single one of you helped me with my dream of maybe making YouTube a full-time job one day. The mere fact that I get to entertain you guys and make a living off of it is incredible. But until that point, I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing. But once again, Internet Wanderer, thank you for watching. Do the YouTube things.